The massive Zetherian warship emerged from the darkness of space, its silver hull reflecting the light of Earth's sun. Inside the command center, Commander Vexler stood tall, his three eyes focused on the blue planet rotating slowly below. He had traveled across countless star systems, met dozens of intelligent species, but this was different. This was humanity's home world. The Zetherians needed to understand these strange creatures before making any agreements. For 6 months, Vexler and his science team had watched the humans from orbit. They studied everything. They analyzed human biology, recorded their communications, and observed their cities. The data they collected painted a picture of a species that seemed almost too fragile to have survived this long. Human bones broke easily compared to other species. Their skin offered no protection against attacks. They had no natural weapons like claws or sharp teeth. They couldn't even survive in their own atmosphere without constant oxygen intake. The science officer, a younger Zetherian named Kexther, presented his findings to the commander every morning. The reports always said the same thing. Humans were weak. Their muscle density was 40% lower than the average spacefaring species. Their reaction times were slower. They needed to eat multiple times every day just to maintain energy. They even spent a third of their lives unconscious in something they called sleep. It seemed impossible that such vulnerable beings had managed to develop space travel. Vexler came from a warrior culture. His people had evolved on Zithera Prime, a world with gravity twice as strong as Earth's. Predators on his home planet could crush steel with their jaws. The Zetherians had survived by becoming stronger, faster, and more aggressive than anything that hunted them. Their bones were dense like stone. Their skin could deflect small blades. A Zetherian warrior could fight for days without rest or food. Looking at human biology was like looking at a child's toy version of a real soldier. When the Zetherian Council finally approved direct contact, Vexler felt a mix of curiosity and something close to pity. These humans had potential, perhaps, but they would need protection in the wider galaxy. Species like the Kravath pirates would destroy them within weeks if they ventured too far from their home system. The commander decided that the Zetherians would offer humanity a protectorate arrangement. The humans would provide their interesting technology and cultural knowledge, and in return, the Zetherians would keep them safe. The meeting was arranged at Concordia Station, a neutral space platform that served as a diplomatic hub for several species. The station orbited a barren moon between Earth and Zetherian space. It was considered safe ground, protected by automated defense systems and patrolled by peacekeeping forces. Perfect for a first contact that might be delicate. Vexler arrived with a full diplomatic team and 20 guards. His guards wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the station's lights, each one standing over 7 feet tall. They carried weapons that could punch through reinforced steel. The commander wanted to make an impression, to show the humans what real military might look like. Perhaps it would help them understand that accepting Zetherian protection was their wisest choice. The human delegation arrived 3 hours later in a much smaller ship. Vexler watched through the observation window as they disembarked. There were 12 of them total. At the front walked a small woman in formal clothing who introduced herself as Ambassador Chen. Behind her came various advisors and technical experts. At the rear, for humans in different uniforms, formed a security detail. The commander studied these human guards with particular interest. They were even smaller than he expected. The tallest among them, a man with dark skin and calm eyes, stood barely 6 feet tall. He wore a green and brown uniform with the word Marines printed across his chest. His name tag read WEBB. This web carried a weapon that looked primitive compared to Zetherian plasma rifles. The other 3 guards looked even less impressive. During the initial greetings, Vexler noticed how the humans moved. They walked with confidence, but their bodies seemed so breakable. Ambassador Chen extended her hand for the traditional human greeting. And when Vexler grasped it gently, he could feel how delicate her bones were beneath the skin. One squeeze and he could shatter every bone in her hand. The thought made him uncomfortable. These beings were like living glass sculptures. The negotiations began in Conference Room 7, a large circular chamber with windows overlooking the moon's gray surface. The Zitherians sat on one side of a long table, the humans on the other. Vexler presented the Protectorate proposal with what he thought was generous language. The Zitherians would station defensive fleets near Earth. They would provide advanced weapons technology. They would train human forces in proper combat techniques. All humanity had to do was accept Zitherian guidance in military and foreign policy matters. Ambassador Chen listened patiently, her face showing no emotion. When Vexler finished, she smiled politely and declined. The humans, she explained, preferred to maintain their independence. They were interested in trade agreements and cultural exchange, but not in becoming a protected species. They had defended themselves successfully for thousands of years and intended to continue doing. So Vex, single quotes Lar, found this amusing and somewhat concerning. Did these humans not understand the dangers waiting in the galaxy? Had they truly fought wars on their planet? Against what? Each other? He had seen their military equipment in the intelligence reports. Chemical propellant weapons. Metal vehicles that rolled on wheels. Aircraft that needed air to fly. It was also primitive. The Cravath alone could devastate Earth within a month. The commander tried a different approach. He showed the humans holographic displays of various hostile species they might encounter. The Cravath with their 8-foot frames and natural armor plating. The Sarkelian swarms that could overwhelm any defense through sheer numbers. The Vorn whose acid blood made them nearly impossible to fight in close quarters. Each image was meant to illustrate a simple point. The galaxy was dangerous, and humans were not equipped to handle it alone. But Ambassador Chen remained unmoved. She thanked Vexler for his concern and repeated that humanity would chart its own course. The talks continued, but the atmosphere grew tense. Vexler's advisors whispered among themselves, clearly frustrated by human stubbornness. The commander himself felt irritation building. Why couldn't these fragile creatures see reason? During a break in negotiations, Vexler stood near the windows, looking out at the stars. Sergeant Webb, the human guard, happened to be standing nearby at his post. The commander decided to speak plainly. Your ambassador is brave, Vexler said, but bravery without strength is just foolishness. You must see that your people cannot survive without allies who can truly fight. Webb turned his head slightly, his dark eyes meeting Vexler's central eye. With respect, Commander, I think you're confusing strength with size. They're not always the same thing. Before Vexler could respond, the station's alarm system screamed to life. Red lights flashed throughout the corridor. An automated voice announced that Concordia Station was under attack. Multiple hostile ships had appeared from nowhere, already breaching the outer hull. The voice identified the attackers as Cravath raiders. Everything was about to change. The alarm kept blaring, its harsh sound echoing through every corridor of Concordia Station. Vexler's combat training kicked in immediately. He barked orders to his guards in the Zitherian language, and they formed a protective circle around the diplomatic team. Their weapons were drawn and ready within seconds. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. Through the windows, Vexler could see the Cravath attack ships. There were at least 8 of them, small and fast, painted in dark colors that made them hard to spot against space. They swarmed around the station like insects around a light. Bright flashes indicated weapons fire. Parts of the station's outer hull exploded, sending debris spinning into the void. The Cravath were not here for negotiations. They were here for blood and plunder. The conference room's emergency systems activated. Heavy blast doors began sliding down over the windows. The lights changed from white to red emergency lighting. Ambassador Chen stood up quickly, her face pale but controlled. Her advisors moved closer to her, fear obvious in their eyes. Vexler felt that familiar mix of pity and responsibility. These humans were about to see why they needed Zitherian protection. But then he noticed something strange. While the human diplomats looked scared, the 4 security guards did not. Sergeant Webb was already moving, speaking quietly into a communication device on his wrist. The other 3 guards, 2 men and 1 woman, spread out with practiced efficiency. They did not panic. They did not freeze. They moved like they had done this before. All diplomatic personnel to the emergency shelter immediately, Webb said, his voice calm and clear. "Stay low, move fast. Follow Corporal Reyes." He pointed to the female guard, a short woman with sharp eyes and black hair tied back tightly. She nodded and began leading Ambassador Chen and the advisors toward the exit. Vexler started to follow with his own team, but he kept watching the humans. Webb and the two other guards were doing something unexpected. They were not running to the shelter. Instead, they were taking defensive positions near the doors, checking their weapons and setting up what looked like a firing line. What did they think they were doing? The station shook violently. Something had exploded nearby, maybe 2 or 3 sections away. Smoke began filtering through the ventilation system. Vexler could hear weapons fire in the distance, along with screams. The station's security forces were engaging the Cravath somewhere in the outer rings. The battle was getting closer. Sergeant Webb Vexler called out, his translator device converting his words to English. "You should retreat to the shelter with your ambassador. My guards will handle the defense here." Webb glanced back at him. "With respect, Commander, your guards need to protect your people. We'll protect ours. That's how this works." He turned back to face the corridor entrance, his weapon raised and ready. Vexler felt insulted. Did this human really think his small team could do anything against Cravath warriors? The Cravath were among the most feared fighters in the galaxy. They stood 8 feet tall with thick exoskeletons that acted like natural armor. Their forearms could wield multiple weapons at once. They felt no mercy and took no prisoners, unless those prisoners could be sold as slaves. 3 humans with primitive firearms would last. Maybe 30 seconds against even a single Cravath. The commander was about to order his guards to forcibly move the humans to safety when the doors at the end of the corridor exploded inward. Smoke and fire filled the passageway. Through the chaos, Vexler saw them. 6 Cravath warriors, each one massive and terrifying, covered in dark armor plates and bristling with weapons. They moved forward with the confidence of predators, who knew they were the most dangerous things in the room. The lead Cravath saw the humans first. It made a sound that Vexler's translator interpreted as laughter. To the Cravath, these small humans must have looked like insects waiting to be crushed. The warrior raised 2 of its weapons, energy cells glowing as they charged up for the kill. Webb did not hesitate. He did not freeze in fear. He did not try to run. He fired. The sound of the human weapon was different from Zetherian plasma rifles. It was sharp, rapid, almost like a machine pounding metal. Vexler expected to see the bullets bounce harmlessly off the Cravath's armor. That was what happened with primitive kinetic weapons. They were useless against modern protection. But the lead Cravath stumbled backward, dark fluid spraying from its neck joint. The human had shot it in the one place where armor plates met flesh, a gap barely 2 inches wide. The Cravath fell, its weapons firing wildly into the ceiling as it collapsed. The other 5 Cravath stopped laughing. They spread out and returned fire, energy bolts searing through the air. But the humans were already moving. They did not stand still like proper soldiers. They rolled, ducked, and used every piece of furniture and wall structure as cover. Their movements seemed chaotic, but Vexler realized there was a pattern. They were creating crossfire angles, forcing the Cravath to split their attention. Corporal Reyes appeared from a side corridor where she had taken the civilians. She was carrying a different weapon, something larger. She dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The projectile hit a Cravath in the center of its chest plate. The armor held, but the impact knocked the warrior backward into its companions. The humans were using the environment against their enemies, making them stumble and collide. Another human guard, whose name tag read Martinez, threw something small and round. Vexler recognized it as a primitive explosive grenade. It detonated near the Cravath group, not killing them, but filling the corridor with smoke and noise. In the confusion, Webb shot another warrior through the eye. The only unarmored spot on its head, Vexler stood frozen, his tactical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These humans were not just surviving, they were winning. 4 guards against 6 Cravath warriors should have been a massacre. But the humans fought with a precision and creativity that seemed impossible. They aimed for weak points that Vexler himself had not immediately identified. They used psychology, making noise and movement to confuse their enemies. They worked together like parts of a single organism. The fourth human guard, Torres, according to his uniform, was hit by an energy bolt. It caught him in the shoulder, burning through his uniform and into the flesh beneath. He cried out in pain and fell. Vexler expected him to stay down. That kind of injury would incapacitate most species for hours. But Torres was back up in less than 5 seconds. His left arm hung useless at his side, smoke still rising from the wound, but his right hand kept firing his weapon. The pain must have been incredible, yet he pushed through it. Vexler had never seen anything like it. The Cravath were retreating now, dragging their wounded back down the corridor. They had come expecting easy prey and found something they did not understand. The humans did not chase them. Webb kept his weapon trained on the corridor, breathing hard but steady. Reyes was checking Torres's wound, pulling out a medical kit. Martinez moved to secure the damaged door. Vexler finally found his voice. "How did you do that?" Webb looked at him, sweat running down his face, a cut bleeding above his left eye. "Do what, Commander?" "You defeated them. 4 of you against 6 Cravath warriors." "It should have been impossible." Webb checked his weapon, replacing the ammunition cartridge with practiced hands. "Sir, we've been fighting each other on Earth for 10,000 years. We've learned a few things about how to win when we're outmatched." He paused, then added, "Being weak means you have to be smart." "We're very smart." The station shook again. More explosions. Closer now. The battle was not over, but something had changed in Vexler's mind. He was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake about these humans. The emergency lights cast strange shadows across the damaged corridor. Bodies of the fallen Cravath warriors lay where they had dropped, their dark blood pooling on the metal floor. Vexler could smell the burning chemicals from their weapons, mixed with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smoke from human gunpowder. The sounds of battle echoed from other parts of the station, sometimes close, sometimes distant. Webb was speaking into his communication device again, coordinating with station security forces. His voice remained steady despite the blood running down his face from the cut above his eye. Vexler noticed that the sergeant did not even seem aware of his own injury. He was too focused on the tactical situation, processing information and making decisions faster than the commander would have thought possible for such a supposedly primitive species. "Corporal," Reyes finished bandaging Torres's shoulder. The injured guard's face was gray with pain, but he refused to go to the medical bay. "I can still shoot with one arm," he told Reyes. She did not argue with him. Instead, she helped him position himself behind cover where he could defend their position if needed. Vexler realized this was another thing he had not expected. These humans had a loyalty to each other that went beyond mere duty. They would rather die fighting together than abandon their team. Martinez returned from checking the damaged doorway. "They've sealed off 3 sections between us and the main hangar," he reported to Webb. "We're using the civilian areas as staging points. Station security is trying to flank them, but they're losing ground." Webb processed this information quickly. He pulled up a holographic map on his wrist device, studying the station's layout. Vexler moved closer to see what the human was planning. The map showed red dots indicating enemy positions, blue dots for friendly forces, and green dots for civilians trapped in various sections. "They're hurting people," Webb said quietly, "pushing them toward the docking bays. They want to take hostages." Vexler felt his blood chill. He had seen Cravath slave raids before. They would capture anyone they could and sell them to the highest bidder. Species did not matter to them. Zetharians, humans, anyone could end up in chains. The commander's guards stood ready, waiting for his orders, but he found himself looking at Webb instead. "What would you do, Sergeant?" Vexler asked. Webb looked surprised by the question. He studied the commander for a moment, then turned back to the map. "We need to hit them from an unexpected angle. They think they control the main corridors, so they're not watching the maintenance tunnels. If we can get a team through the lower levels, we can come up behind their position and break their formation." It was a good plan, Vexler had to admit. Aggressive and risky, but it used the enemy's overconfidence against them. "My guards can do this," the commander said. "They are trained for close-quarters combat. With respect, sir, your guards are big. Really big. The maintenance tunnels are built for normal-sized species. Your warriors would get stuck." Webb paused, then added, "But we can fit." Vexler understood what the human was suggesting. Webb and his team would go through the tunnels, moving behind enemy lines to attack the Kravoth from their blind side. It was the kind of mission that required speed, silence, and the ability to fight in cramped spaces. The commander's pride wanted to refuse. His warriors were supposed to be the protectors here, but his tactical mind won out. Webb was right. The humans were better suited for this particular job. "How many do you need?" Vexler asked. "Just us 4, Webb replied. "Small team, less noise, faster movement. Torres is injured. He should stay here." Torres spoke up before Webb could respond. "I go where my team goes, Commander. One working arm is better than none." Vexler saw the determination in the human's eyes and recognized it. It was the same look his own warriors got before battle. The look that said death was preferable to dishonor. He nodded slowly. "Then my guards will create a distraction in the main corridor. We will draw their attention while you move." Webb extended his hand, and this time Vexler shook it firmly. The human's grip was weaker than his Etherian's, but there was strength there nonetheless. A different kind of strength that the commander was only beginning to understand. The next 10 minutes were spent in preparation. Vexler's guards checked their weapons and armor. The humans did the same with their simpler equipment, but they also did something the Zetharians did not. They talked to each other, quiet words that the commander could not fully hear. They were not discussing tactics. It seemed more personal than that. Reyes touched Martinez's shoulder. Webb said something that made Torres smile despite his pain. They were preparing their spirits as well as their weapons. When they were ready, Webb's team moved toward the maintenance access panel. The entrance was small and dark, barely large enough for a human to crawl through. Vexler watched them disappear one by one into the tunnel. Torres went last, moving slower because of his injury, but not complaining. Then they were gone, and Vexler was left with a strange feeling in his chest. Worry, perhaps? Or maybe respect. "Move forward," Vexler ordered his guards in Zetherian. "Make noise. Make them think we are the main attack." His warriors advanced down the main corridor, firing their plasma rifles at maximum brightness. The energy bolts lit up the smoke-filled passage like lightning. They shouted battle cries in their native language, announcing their presence. The Kravoth responded immediately, turning fire and moving to meet this new threat. The battle was loud and bright, exactly what Vexler wanted. His guards used their superior armor and strength to push forward, drawing more and more Kravoth warriors into the fight. The enemy was focused entirely on the Zetharian advance. They never thought to watch their backs. Below, in the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, Webb and his team moved like ghosts. Vexler could not see them, but he could imagine it. The humans crawling through tight spaces, their smaller size now an advantage, moving toward the enemy position with deadly purpose. Suddenly, the Kravoth line collapsed. Vexler heard screams and saw warriors falling, shot from behind. The humans had emerged from the maintenance tunnels exactly where they needed to be. Webb and his team were firing from cover, each shot precise and devastating. The Kravoth tried to respond to this new threat. They were now caught between two forces. Vexler pressed his advantage, ordering his guards to charge. The Zetharians hit the Kravoth line like a hammer, their superior strength and armor overwhelming the confused enemy. The battle turned into a rout. Kravoth warriors fled toward their ships, abandoning their wounded and their stolen goods. When the fighting ended, Vexler found Webb and his team in the corridor where the civilians had been trapped. The humans were helping people to their feet, checking for injuries, offering calm words of reassurance. Webb's uniform was torn and burned in several places. He had new cuts and bruises. Torres looked like he might collapse at any moment, but they were all alive. "The civilians are secure," Webb reported. "Station security is retaking the outer sections. The Kravoth are retreating to their ships." Vexler looked at this small human sergeant, this warrior from a species he had dismissed as weak. "You fight well, Sergeant Webb. You all do." Webb nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Commander. Your guards did good work, too. We made a good team." A team, yes. Vexler realized that was exactly what they had been. Not protectors and protected, not strong and weak, but partners working toward the same goal. The commander felt his understanding shift again, like a puzzle piece finally finding its proper place. The medical bay of Concordia Station was crowded with wounded from both sides of the fight. Cytherian guards sat beside human security officers. Station personnel worked frantically to treat everyone, their medical equipment humming and beeping as it analyzed injuries and dispensed treatments. The air smelled of antiseptic and burned flesh. Vexler watched as a medical technician put down Sergeant Webb. The human had refused treatment at first, insisting that others with more serious injuries should be helped first. It took a direct order from Ambassador Chen to make him sit down on the medical table. The technician cleaned the cut above Webb's eye and sealed it with a tissue regenerator. The sergeant had also taken a glancing energy burn across his ribs and had somehow broken 2 fingers on his left hand without even noticing. What fascinated Vexler most was how Webb responded to pain. When the technician said his broken fingers, the sergeant's face tightened and he breathed out slowly, but he made no sound of complaint. The pain must have been significant, yet the humans simply endured it. Cytherians were tough, but they had natural pain suppressors in their biology. Humans did not. They felt everything fully and still kept going. Corporal Reyes sat nearby, getting treatment for burns on her arms. She had shield web during one of the firefights, taking hits meant for him. Torres was in worse shape, lying on a bed while doctors worked on his shoulder wound. The injury had damaged muscle and bone, and he would need surgery. But even now, sedated and half-conscious, he kept asking if his team was safe. Martinez had been the luckiest, with only minor cuts and bruises. He sat beside Torres's bed, talking quietly to his injured teammate, promising him that everyone was okay. The bond between these humans went deeper than military discipline, Vexler realized. They genuinely cared about each other's survival in a way that seemed to make them stronger as a unit. Ambassador Chen arrived at the medical bay with her advisors. She looked tired but composed. When she saw Webb, relief crossed her face. "Sergeant, thank you. You and your team saved a lot of lives today." Webb stood up, wincing slightly from his injuries. "Just doing our job, ma'am," Chen smiled. "Your job description does not include fighting off armed raiders single-handedly. The station commander tells me you coordinated with Cytherian forces to break the Kravath siege. That was good work." Vexler stepped forward. "Ambassador Chen, I must apologize. I underestimated your people. I believed you needed our protection, but today your soldiers fought with skill I have rarely seen." The ambassador studied him carefully. "Commander, we did not come here to prove ourselves in battle. We came hoping for peaceful cooperation, but I appreciate your honesty." She paused. "Perhaps this unfortunate incident has shown us something important. We do not need a protector, but we could use an ally." The word ally carried different weight than protectorate. It suggested equality, mutual respect, partnership between equals, rather than strong and weak. Vexler found himself nodding. "Yes, an ally. I think that would be beneficial for both our peoples." Over the next several hours, as the station's security forces finished clearing out the last Kravath holdouts and repairing critical damage, Vexler spent time talking with the human security team. He asked them questions about their training, their tactics, their philosophy of combat. Webb explained that human military training focused heavily on adaptability. "We know we're not the biggest or strongest," he said, "so we train to think faster, to use our environment to find advantages where none seem to exist. Every human soldier learns that their mind is their most important weapon," Martinez added. "We also study our enemies. We learn how they move, how they think, what they expect. Then we do something different. Surprise is almost as good as superior firepower." Reyes, her arms now bandaged, talked about unit cohesion. "We fight for each other," she said simply. "When you know your teammates will never abandon you, you can push yourself beyond what you thought possible." Fear does not disappear, but it becomes manageable. Vexler absorbed all of this, comparing it to Zithrian military doctrine. His people relied on their natural advantages of strength, durability, and aggression. They trained to be better at what they were already good at. Humans, lacking those natural advantages, had been forced to develop something else entirely. They had turned their weakness into a different kind of strength, the commander science officer. Kexler arrived at the medical bay looking troubled. He carried a datapad filled with new analyses. "Commander, I have been reviewing recordings from the battle. I need to revise my previous assessments of human capabilities."
How so?
Vexler asked. Kexler pulled up footage from the security cameras. It showed Webb and his team fighting the Cravath in the corridor. "Watch their movement patterns. They never stay still. They use cover that seems inadequate, but they position themselves so the enemy cannot get clear shots. Their accuracy with kinetic weapons is extraordinary, especially considering the stress of combat." The science officer pulled up more data. "But what truly stands out is their ability to function while injured." Torres continued fighting effectively despite a wound that should have incapacitated him. "Human pain tolerance is significantly higher than I calculated. They have psychological mechanisms that allow them to override their body's warning systems." "Is that not dangerous?" Vexler asked. "Ignoring pain can lead to greater injury," as Kexler agreed. "But in combat, the ability to keep fighting when injured is often the difference between survival and death." Humans evolved as persistence hunters on their home world. They would track prey for days, running until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Their biology is optimized for endurance, not burst strength. That is why they can keep going when other species would stop. Vexler thought about this. The Zithrians had always valued immediate power and intimidating presence. But humans had developed a different survival strategy. They won by outlasting their opponents, by being more stubborn than any enemy expected. Later that evening, after the most seriously wounded had been stabilized and the station was declared secure, Vexler requested a private meeting with Webb. They sat in a quiet observation lounge, looking out at the stars through the repaired windows. "Sergeant Webb, I have a question for you," Vexler began. "When you saw the Cravath coming, you must have known you were outmatched in size and strength. Why did you not retreat?" Webb was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Commander, in human history, we have a lot of stories about people who faced impossible odds. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. But the ones we remember are the ones who stood their ground when it mattered. We teach our children that courage is not about being unafraid. It is about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway," continued. "I was scared when I saw those Cravath warriors. But I had people depending on me. My team, the ambassador, the civilians. If I ran, they might die. So running was not an option. You figure out how to win, or you die trying. That is just how humans are built."
House.
Vexler felt something shift in his understanding, a fundamental recalibration of his worldview. He had spent his whole life believing that physical power determined worth in combat, but here was proof that intelligence, determination, and creativity could overcome raw strength. "You have taught me something valuable today, Sergeant," Vexler said. "I will not forget it." Webb smiled tiredly. "And you taught me something too, Commander. Your guards fought with honor today. When we work together, we are stronger than either of us alone." Outside the window, ships were arriving to evacuate the wounded and bring supplies. The crisis was over. But for Vexler, something new was beginning. 3 weeks after the attack on Concordia Station, Vexler sat in his private quarters aboard the Zithrian flagship, reading through reports about Earth and its people. He had requested everything the intelligence services had on human history, and what he found was remarkable. The documents covered thousands of years of human warfare, exploration, and survival. Every page revealed patterns he had missed in the original assessment. Humans had fought each other almost constantly throughout their history. Nation against nation, tribe against tribe, sometimes even family against family. They had developed hundreds of different fighting styles, thousands of tactical approaches, and endless variations on strategy. War had shaped their entire civilization. But what struck Vexler most was not the fighting itself. It was how humans responded to being defeated. Other species, when conquered, typically accepted their fate or went extinct. Humans did neither. They adapted. They learned from their conquerors, adopted their enemies' tactics, and came back stronger. The reports showed examples going back thousands of years. Small groups defeating larger armies through clever tactics, outnumbered defenders holding impossible positions, civilians rising up against occupying forces and winning through sheer determination. One report detailed something called the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of thousands. They all died, but they bought time for their people to prepare. The Spartans knew they would die and fought anyway. Vexler found this both horrifying and inspiring. Another report discussed the siege of Leningrad, where human civilians endured years of starvation and bombardment rather than surrender. They ate anything they could find, burned furniture for warmth, and kept fighting. Over 1 million died, but the city never fell. What kind of species could endure such suffering and still refuse to give up? Kexler entered the quarters carrying more data. "Commander, I have completed the new threat assessment for humanity. You should see this." Vexler took the datapad and read through the analysis. Kexler had reclassified humans from a category for species requiring protection to a category 2 species capable of independent defense and potential military partnership. The report cited multiple factors, including tactical creativity, pain tolerance, adaptability under stress, and something Kexler called psychological resilience. "Explain this resilience," Vexler requested. The science officer pulled up comparative data. Most species have limits to how much stress they can handle before they break down psychologically. Combat, injuries, loss of companions, these things cause what we call trauma. All species experience it, but humans have an unusual ability to process trauma and continue functioning. They even have a saying about it: what does not kill them makes them stronger. Kexler continued, "I studied Sergeant Webb's background specifically. He has been in 17 major combat situations before the Concordia incident. He has been wounded 4 times. He has seen teammates die. By Zetherian standards, he should be psychologically damaged, unable to fight effectively. But he continues to serve, continues to lead, continues to make sound tactical decisions under pressure." Vexler thought about this. So humans are not just physically tough. They are mentally tough as well. Exactly. And that mental toughness, combined with their tactical creativity, makes them far more dangerous than we initially calculated. "Commander, if humans had our technology and resources, they would be one of the most formidable military powers in the galaxy." This assessment aligned with what Vexler had been thinking. He had reported his observations to the Zitherian High Council, recommending a complete revision of their diplomatic approach to humanity. The council had been skeptical at first, but after reviewing the battle footage from Concordia Station, they agreed to reconsider. The new treaty negotiations began 2 weeks later. Again, at Concordia Station, after repairs were completed. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. Vexler and his delegation approached the humans as equals, not as weak beings needing protection. Ambassador Chen noticed the change immediately and responded with warm professionalism. The new agreement included military cooperation and technology exchange. Humans would share their tactical knowledge and training methods. Zetherians would provide advanced weapons technology and defensive systems. Both species would conduct joint training exercises to learn from each other's strengths. Most importantly, the treaty established a mutual defense pact. If either species was attacked, the other would come to their aid. True allies, standing together against common threats. During the treaty signing ceremony, Vexler made a formal statement that was broadcast across both their civilizations. He spoke carefully, wanting his words to carry the weight of truth. For too long, the Zetherian Empire measured strength by physical power alone. We believed that size, natural armor, and raw might determine worth in combat. The events at Concordia Station have proven us wrong. We encountered humans who faced enemies larger and stronger than themselves, yet prevailed through intelligence, courage, and determination. He paused, making sure his translator was conveying his meaning properly. Sergeant Marcus Webb and his team showed us that true strength comes not from the body alone, but from the mind and spirit. Humans may be physically fragile by our standards, but they possess something we had not recognized. They possess the will to fight when fighting seems hopeless. They possess the creativity to find victory where none appears possible. And they possess the loyalty to stand with their companions even when standing means certain death. Vexler looked directly at Webb, who sat in the audience in his dress uniform with his team beside him. These are not the qualities of a weak species. These are the qualities of warriors. We are honored to call humanity our allies. The ceremony concluded with representatives from both species signing the treaty document. As ambassadors and officials mingled afterward, Vexler found himself talking with Webb once more. "I never thanked you properly, Sergeant," Vexler said. "You changed how I see the universe." "That is a rare gift," Webb smiled. "You gave us a gift too, Commander. You could have been offended when we proved ourselves. Some species would have held a grudge. Instead, you learned from what happened and became an ally. That takes wisdom." "Perhaps we both learned something," Vexler suggested. "You learned that not all powerful species seek to dominate. We learned that power comes in many forms." Over the following months, the partnership between Zetharians and humans grew stronger. Joint military exercises revealed that combining Scythian strength with human tactics created a fighting force more effective than either species alone. Zetharian warriors learned to think more creatively in combat. Human soldiers learned to utilize better technology and armor. The news spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to reassess their understanding of humanity. The Kravath, in particular, learned to avoid human targets. Word had gotten out about what happened at Concordia Station, and no pirate wanted to face opponents who fought like cornered predators. Vexler requested and received permission to establish a permanent military exchange program. Young Zetharian warriors would train with human forces on Earth, while human soldiers would train with Zetharian forces on Zethara Prime. The commander himself planned to participate in the first exchange. Wanting to learn directly from human instructors, on his final evening at Concordia Station before returning home, Vexler stood at the observation window where he had first seen Earth months ago. The planet looked the same as before, a blue marble hanging in space. But his understanding of what that planet represented had changed completely. Webb joined him at the window. "Thinking about your first impressions?" the sergeant asked, as Vexler admitted. "I looked at your world and saw weakness. Small creatures surviving on an easy planet. I was completely wrong." Webb shook his head. "Earth is not an easy planet, Commander. We have predators, diseases, natural disasters, extreme climates. Our world tried to kill our ancestors every day. That is why we evolved to be survivors. We learned to outlast everything that wanted to destroy us." Vexler understood now. Humans were not weak despite their fragile bodies. They were strong because of them. Their physical limitations had forced them to develop mental and all psychological capabilities that more naturally powerful species never needed. They had turned vulnerability into advantage. "I will share something with you, Sergeant," Vexler said. "In Zetharian, we have a word, Kethvorin. It means a warrior who wins through mind rather than muscle. It is a term of highest respect in our culture, but we rarely use it because such warriors are rare. You and your people are Kethvorin." Webb considered this. "I am honored, Commander, and I think our two peoples will do great things together." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Two warriors from different worlds who had learned to see each other clearly. The galaxy had not changed, but their place in it had shifted. Humans were no longer unknown or underestimated. And Zetharians had learned that strength was not always what it appeared to be. In the distance, transport ships were preparing for departure. Vexler would return to Zethara Prime to begin the exchange program. Webb would remain at Concordia Station as a liaison officer. Their paths would cross again, both as allies and as friends. The universe was vast and full of dangers. But now, facing those dangers together, both species stood stronger than before. And that, Vexler thought, was the true meaning of alliance.